What is up, guys? My name is Jason Ankin and this is my vlog channel. So I decided to do this vlog in my car because there's people getting up and about and running about in my house. Not that this is any better here, because I've got people just to the right hand side of me who are just sitting there looking at me talking into my camera by myself. But anyway, modern life. Can't get any solitude no matter where you go. So I'm literally about 1.5 miles away from my house to come to a car park to get solitude, and then someone comes and drives right beside me, winds their window down and starts smoking. But anyway, so yes, these videos are very spontaneous. It's really just about fleshing ideas that are in my head. And today's video, the last two videos, I was talking about fitness and health. So I was talking about diet and exercise in relation to, I guess, a more biological sort of evolutionary understanding of what physical training and diet should be like, because that's one of the big flaws within when people are talking about diet and people are talking about exercise. They never talk about these topics in reference to the fact that people are animals and we evolved in nature, and our physiology has evolved specific physiological functions. So in order to optimize health, what you should do is you do training methodologies that basically facilitate the development of those specific functions. And it's exactly the same with health. So there's a lot of massive confusion in the sort of exercise and nutrition industry, simply because they don't take into consideration what the hell a human actually is. So to further extend these vlogs, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the philosophies that I'm kind of interested in. So I've been studying philosophy probably for about 10 years now, and in reality I was just curious and I was just looking into these philosophies. I was reading them. I originally got into studying things like world mythology, and this was actually inspired by the computer game Tomb Raider. So Tomb Raider Anniversary, that game was probably to date my favorite game ever that I played, and it had an Arthurian theme and Arthurian King Arthur and stuff like that. And basically from that there was a lot of symbolism and a lot of mythology in and throughout the game. And what I decided after playing that game was I was going to start studying this stuff in real life rather than just sort of seeing about it in computer games. And that led me to studying world mythology. So I went from an individual who didn't read any books whatsoever to reading probably some of the most complex literary text on the planet. And I was just impressed by the fact that these books still exist even 2,000 years later. So what is it about these books that have such lasting endurance? And obviously humanity since the beginning of time has always valued these books, so there must be something to them that that's really difficult to understand. So that's basically what I started doing. I started studying into world mythology. The study of world mythology eventually led to the study of philosophy, and then that also led to the study of things like psychology. So over the years I've basically accumulated a small library of different books. Probably, I would say I'm in possession of maybe 200 or more books. And that's really started to slow down now because I've got most of the kind of texts that I want to read. And the thing is, I haven't actually read most. I end up buying books and then I just literally leave them on the shelf and I never actually get around to reading them, because books take a long time to read. They take about 2 to 3 weeks to read a decent book. And if you're really interested in certain topics, it's very difficult to have an organized kind of study routine when there's certain things you want to read and then you buy this other book of a different subject and you kind of leave it sitting there and whatnot. But basically over time is I've became through trial and error and through sort of thinking and I guess contemplating, I've come to a kind of understanding of what what philosophies align with me the best, what philosophies suit my temperament the best. And fundamentally, I've boiled it down to two main philosophies, one from the West and one from the East. And the Western philosophy that I'm really interested in is Stoicism. The philosophy that I'm really interested in the East is Taoism. I did a video previous on Taoism, talking about I was going to get deeper into it because I think Taoism is it's much better for a sort of way of life rather than Stoicism is more about, Stoicism is a way of life, but it seems, even though I think it's very useful, there are certain aspects of it, maybe it's not as complete, it's not as holistic as something like Taoism. Stoicism is very centered around the idea that things are just outside of your control and you should learn to adjust your mental attitude to these things. Whereas Taoism's very similar, but it's a little bit more holistic, it's a little bit more official. There's training methodologies, there's meditation methodologies, there's an ethical code and stuff like that. And actually it's interesting that both of these kind of philosophies have a very similar core ethical code. So for example, the main core ethic in Stoicism is to live according to nature, and Taoism is to follow the Tao, and the Tao is basically sometimes referred to as the way or sometimes the natural way. So again, there's this nature element to it, that you sort of conform to natural law, and you cultivate and develop your innate nature to its fullest ability. For example, in Stoicism they will talk about the idea that you need to, so in Stoicism they say that man is, what is man? What is his human nature? And what they've come to the conclusion is that man is a thinking creature, but also a social creature. So the idea behind this is basically through the cultivation and development of your thinking, and through the cultivation and development of your essentially social interactions with others, you'll basically develop yourself as a holistic, full individual, and you will basically live well. And this is centered around what's called the 4 cardinal virtues. So the first one is prudence, the second one is justice. Prudence helps you to train your mind and your ability to reason, your ability to discern, and justice helps you train your ability to essentially live in harmony with other people. So you're not infringing upon other people's rights and essentially just making life better for other people. So for example, if you're going out and harming people, you're kind of getting in the way of other people's lives. So by being just, and you avoid causing harm to others. Whereas if others are not just to you, then they're causing harm to you. So if I'm just and another person is just, then we kind of have this non-resistance life where I'm basically not causing them harm and they're not causing me harm. But anyway, at the minute I'm more positively aligned with the Stoic philosophy. I'm more positively aligned with the Taoist philosophy. This car park is really busy. I came down here to actually get out of the way of people, and there's a non-stop stream of people coming in and coming out. It's one of the things I have to get used to if I want to continue vlogging, is the social anxiety when you're vlogging. Because people are very curious, they want to sort of listen to what you're talking about. So there's like a group of like 5 lads is all looking at me. So it's weird. But anyway, yeah, it's great. Maybe they can watch the video instead of watching me. So yeah. So what is Taoism? So Taoism essentially is centered around this philosophy called the Tao Te Ching. And the Tao Te Ching is basically, if translated into English, is the scripture of Tao and the scripture of Te. So very similar to Stoicism in that the scripture of Tao is essentially the natural way. If you were to convert this to a Western understanding, what is the natural way? It just means the laws of nature, or what would be described in the West as natural law. again, another sort of mainstream interpretation of this would be yeah, well, natural law would be sort of like an understanding of karma. I think the Tao is a little different in that it's a little bit more like the path of least resistance. So the Tao always is able to basically effortlessly manifest the external universe without any effort. And the idea is you should get yourself in harmony with this non-resistant force referred to as the Tao. And how you do this is by upholding Te. And Te is translated as benevolence or virtue. I like to sort of translate it as the concept of conscience. So the capacity to tell the difference between right and wrong, and then to choose rightly. And as you choose rightly, then what you're able to do is you're able to get in harmony with Te. You're able to get in harmony with the Tao, get in harmony with natural law. And this is exactly the same sort of thing that's talked about in Stoicism, except maybe a little different in the terminology. Essentially, in Stoicism, you use your reason to get in harmony with justice. So you do what's morally and ethically good. And when you do what's morally and ethically good, then you're a virtuous person. And if you're virtuous, then you're considered to be someone that is in harmony with natural law. It's exactly the same philosophy, except there's a slightly different approach to getting there. So I actually have the book with me, the Tao Te Ching. This is the version that I use. So it's a little pocket version. It's a very, very tiny book, very, very small. It's got filled with 81 parables. And basically I've been reading this book since probably about 2014. So I've been reading this close to 5 years. And I now read this book on a day-to-day basis. I currently read 10 chapters a day every night before I go to bed. But I'm looking to get up to the point where I'm going to maybe read half the book every night. The scripture is broken down into, like I said, Ching is the book, Tao is the way, and Te is virtue, benevolence, conscience, etc. So it's called the scripture of Tao and the scripture of Te. And it's essentially broken down into two parts. So the first part is the first 37 chapters, I believe. The first 37 chapters is all about the scripture of Tao, and the following chapters after that are the scriptures of Te. So what I'm aiming to get up to is to where I'm reading the scripture of Tao one day and then the scripture of Te the next day, so I can get through the book essentially every 48 hours. Because one of the sort of things that Lao Tzu said, who's the individual who wrote this book, which just means wise old man. What Lao Tzu said is, when you read this book 10,000 times, you will ascend to heaven in broad daylight. And obviously that's some sort of metaphor. It's not to be taken literally. But the idea is that with every reading of the Tao Te Ching, you're cleansing and you're purifying your soul, your spirit. And the idea is that after you read this book 10,000 times, your soul, your spirit will be pure. It'll be clean. So how do I actually practice Taoism? So there are mainly 4 main components that I use to study Taoism. The first one is really the study of Taoist scriptures. So this book in particular is the main book. It's getting a little bit old. I'm thinking about getting it a hardback binding on the book to help preserve this specific my specific copy. So yeah, fundamentally you want to study the philosophy. I do have the other Taoist books as well, which is the book of Zhuangzi and the book of Liezi. I have actually not fully read these other 2 books. I've mostly read the book of Zhuangzi, but I have not read the book of Liezi fully. So, but the thing is, they're just talking about the same concepts. Really, the only scripture you need is the Tao Te Ching. So that's the first thing that I would do, is I would read the scripture every day. aiming to get up to the point of reading the full book once every 2 days, which would actually get me up to reading it nearly 700 times. Over 140, 150, around about 200 times a year, which is quite significant. But that would be practice number 1. The second practice that I do is what's referred to as Taoist meditation. So Taoist meditation, the main method of Taoist meditation is a method known as sitting and forgetting. And it is the most fundamental, the most rudimentary form of meditation that's always taught. It's taught in Buddhism, it's taught in Hinduism, it's taught in Taoism. And basically, sitting and forgetting is basically sitting, keeping the mind empty, emptying the mind, stilling the body, and redirecting your attention to the breath. So focusing your attention on the in-breath and the out-breath. And again, this is believed that you can attain full liberation, full purity. If only you just practice this form of meditation and nothing else, again, you would be able to attain liberation from your suffering, because it would cleanse and purify your spirit. So I combine that, and I do that every evening. I'm doing about 20 minutes of that meditation in the evening. My ultimate goal is to get up to 1 hour, and I just do it last thing at night, because I think it's appropriate to do meditation at night because you're about to go to bed, rather than doing it in the morning. Now, the third practice that I do is I do a physical training practice. Now, in Taoism, they have this stuff called Qigong. Now, I've dabbled around with Qigong, and in reality, I'm not a huge fan of it. I'm really not a big fan in sort of the standing. It's kind of like Tai Chi movements, where you have to like stand and move your body with the breath. And even though I would consider this to be a useful thing to do, I don't actually practice it myself. What I do is I do yoga. So I actually follow a system of yoga. It was in one of my other videos. It's called Hatha Yoga, classic Hatha Yoga. Again, I don't like labels. In reality, what I'm doing is just a deep morning stretch. And again, this is recommended in the E Ching. Both stilling the mind and both maintaining suppleness and flexibility is something that's recommended that we do in the Tao Te Ching. And the fourth practice is the ethical system. This is something I've only really started to take into consideration a little bit more seriously, and that is what's referred to as the Taoist precepts. So these are like the Taoist version of the 10 Commandments. So the 10 Commandments, you would have 10 rules, 10 things you should abstain from. In Taoism, you only have 5, and these are no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no taking of intoxicants. So I've only really started to adopt these into my life. So you can see the way that this is actually a very holistic system. Taoism, you have the theory, the Taoist, the Tao Te Ching in itself. You got the theory here. Then you've got the training of the mind, which is the meditation of sitting and forgetting. You have the training of the body, which is to maintain suppleness. And so I practice a thing like Hatha Yoga. And early Qigong was actually called Dao Yin. And Dao Yin was considered as Taoist yoga. So Qigong came from Dao Yin. So I'm doing it, I guess, morning stretch is a bit more primitive, whereas something like Qigong and the like of Tai Chi, these are a little bit more modern to a certain degree. So I'm reverting back to a sort of more primitive way of training and maintaining the health of the body. And then obviously you've got the ethical conduct. So this is the 5 precepts. There also is 3 additional virtues in Taoism called the 3 treasures. So the 3 treasures are compassion, moderation, and humility. And these are sort of like the 3 virtues. So you'd have the ethical precepts, which is the Taoist precepts. These are the things to avoid doing. and then you would have the three treasures. These are the things that you should do. You should live. You should be outwardly empathetic, outwardly compassionate. You should live moderately. Don't live to excess. And then you should also live a life of humility. So this is the idea that essentially it's daring not to be first. That's what's listed in the Tao Te Ching. Daring not to be first, but this translates as humility. So you can see, like I said, it's a very holistic system. We have a philosophical system such as the Tao Te Ching, a mental training system, meditation, a physical training system, and then an ethical code, because obviously the synthesis of your mind and your body is your action. So if you keep your mind and your body healthy, then you increase the likelihood that your action will also be healthy as well. So they're all necessary components in order to have like a holistic sort of approach. And it's a form of training. It's a form of it's a system to live your life by, and that's why I like this system. There's also another really well-known book. So I have another book with me. It is called the E Ching. So the E Ching, the Pocket E Ching, the Little Book of Changes. This is a really famous book on divination. I have two versions of this. This is actually believed to be one of the oldest books in human history, and I prefer this book. I've got a little miniature version of it. The original translation of the E Ching is very big. It's about 500 pages, but I find this little pocket-sized book does just as well. I really like smaller text because, like I said, I've got a huge amount of books and a huge amount of things to study. So the smaller the book, the easier it is for me to get through. And so right there's your sort of Taoism starter kit. You got your Tao Te Ching, and you got your E Ching, the Book of Changes, and you can these are kind of the underlying philosophies within Taoism. The E Ching I don't use as much, but it is very interesting. I have dabbled about with it, and maybe I'll get into it in a later stage. What's cool about these vlogs is I can basically go into greater detail, because these books, this book, for example, the Tao Te Ching, is so deep, it's so profound, that I could do a whole video just on one of these parables or one of these chapters, no problem. There's 81 chapters in total, and that's what I'll probably be doing in the future. Once I'll maybe do videos on my favorite chapter, which I think is at the minute it's number, if you want to go check it out, number 16. I'm not going to get into the detail of it, but number 16 is my favorite chapter so far. But yeah, I'll be able to extend on this more in the future. But this is just basically an overview of the philosophical system that I follow, and the philosophical system that I think suits my temperament. And I think that's what it boils down to, you know. It boils down to the fact that what resonates with your temperament best. And temperamentally, I would say I'm quite left-wing libertarian in my sort of views of things. And I think Taoism is almost like the perfect left-wing libertarian kind of philosophy. And it's not something I can change. You know, I've often thought, you know, why don't you just become a Christian, because you're born and raised in a Christian culture and stuff. I just can't agree with it, because there's too much superstition, and there's too much supernaturalness, and it's actually more mythological and more you know, I don't really agree with theology, period. I'm not a big believer in theology, like the fall of man and salvation and final judgment and all of this type of stuff. I think these are all metaphorical. If I was ever going to be a Christian, I could only be a non-literalist, or what I would describe as a philosophical Christian, meaning I would follow the Christian way of life as a philosophy rather than a theology. But again, a lot of Christians are quite intellectually dishonest, so I don't know if I could have integrity while being part of a Christian community, because if I asked them, do you really believe in Adam and Eve? They would say yes. I would say, well, is there any evidence, or does it even make sense logically? And they would probably say blah 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 blah, and then I would just lose interest. So something like Taoism, something like Stoicism, which actually conforms to logic, which actually can be proven with evidence. There aren't any theological claims that are being made in this. You can observe with your vision, you can observe with your senses. You know, I'm sitting in nature right now. I can see nature is manifesting itself effortlessly, just exactly as the Tao said. So right now, this is the kind of philosophy that I'm aligning with temperamentally, and it's really good. So yeah, hopefully. So really, that's it today. I wanted to just have a little rant about my study into Taoism, and like I said, we'll be able to continue exploring this a little bit more. Maybe I can go into more deeper detail about the individual components. I can maybe go into individual chapters within the Tao Te Ching and talk about the meaning of it. I can maybe do videos on different methods of meditation that you can use, or meditations that I use. Go into different videos talking about maybe the ethical system and what it means and stuff like that. So it's infinitely expandable. This is kind of an introduction video, talking just to give people a heads up. This is kind of what I'm into, and it just gives us an opportunity to be able to expand on this later in the future. So I am going to end the video there. We're getting up to about 26 minutes. I got work later on this evening. So yes, remember, if you have any questions whatsoever, remember to post them down below in the comment section, and I will try to answer them in the next vlog. Remember to follow me on Instagram, where I'm going to start posting up more regular pictures about my life on a day-to-day basis. You'll be able to find me at jason.ankin. It's also in the About section on my YouTube channel, or it'll be linked down in the description below. So yes, my name is Jason Ankin. This is my vlog channel, and I will see you next time. Bye.